In this video, we're going to discuss the topics of power, conflict, and negotiation. First, let's talk about organizational conflict and its various stages. Organizational conflict happens when individuals or groups within an organization obviously have incompatible goals, interests, or values. And this can lead to drama and conflict, disagreement, or opposition. Conflict is natural. It happens in every organization and it happens at every level. It can be between individuals, teams, departments. It can be any combination of people in an organization. And it's important to manage effectively because conflict can impact the organization's effectiveness. The stages of organizational conflict, they typically involve the following. The first stage is latent conflict. This is where you have potential for conflict, and that potential exists due to underlying factors right beneath the surface. This can be things like scarce resources, differences in values, or competing goals. So the conflict is latent. It's lying there in wait, kind of like a tiger in the grass waiting to pounce, but it hasn't yet manifested. Next is perceived conflict. This is where you have individuals or groups, they're starting to become aware of the conflict. They're starting to recognize, hey, our goals and interests, they're not in tandem, we're opposition. This stage, the perceived conflict stage, is where you acknowledge the disagreement. The next stage is felt conflict. This is where you start to see emotions like anger, frustration, anxiety crop up as the conflict starts to become a little more personal in nature. The intensity of that conflict increases as parties begin to take the situation increasingly seriously. The next step is manifest conflict. The conflict becomes visible through behaviors like arguments, sabotage, or open opposition. This is the stage where conflict is actively expressed and it can really start to disrupt organizational functioning. And finally, conflict aftermath. This is the resolution, or in some cases, the lack of resolution of the conflict that affects future interactions. If the conflict is resolved constructively and positively, relationships may actually be strengthened. If it's not, however, it can lead to lingering resentment or future drama. Understanding these stages helps managers identify and address conflicts early while it's still in that latent stage, preventing that escalation and ultimately promoting a more harmonious work environment. Now let's examine conflict resolution strategies. Effective conflict resolution involves identifying the most appropriate strategy to manage and resolve conflicts based on the specific situation. Here are some common strategies. One is avoidance. I see this a lot in business. People just don't want to deal with it. With avoidance, you ignore the conflict or you put off the resolution, delaying it in the hope that it'll work itself out. That rarely is true. This strategy is often used when the conflict is trivial, low stakes, or when there's a need to just cool down emotions before tackling the issue. Accommodation. This is where one party gives in completely to the other's demands. They often do it because they want to preserve harmony or they're averse to confrontation. They just don't want the headache of the drama and the conflict. The accommodation strategy might be effective when the issue is really important to one party and not so much the other, but it can lead to resentment if it's overused. Another strategy or approach to conflict is competition. This is where you have one party seeking to win the conflict at the expense of another person. They often do this through assertive or aggressive tactics. Now, this strategy is not always terrible. Sometimes it's even appropriate in situations where you need quick, decisive action, but it can obviously damage relationships if it's not managed and used very carefully. Next is compromise. This is where both parties are going to give and take. Both parties make concessions because they want to reach a mutually agreeable solution. Compromise is most often used when both parties have equally important goals and they're willing to give something up to achieve resolution. And finally, collaboration. This sounds a little bit like compromise, but it's a little different. With the collaboration approach to conflict, both parties work together. They're not just giving stuff up, but they're working together. They're collaborating, a collab. So they're working together to find a solution that satisfies everyone's needs. This strategy is ideal for resolving conflicts where maintaining positive relationships is really important. And this is a great strategy because it often leads to more sustainable long-term solutions. There are no right or wrong strategies when it comes to conflict. It just depends on the situation and the people involved. But ultimately, by selecting the right one, the right conflict strategy, Organizations can manage disputes effectively, minimizing disruption and promoting positive outcomes and positive culture. Now let's take a look at the sources of organizational power. Power in organizations just refers to the ability that people or groups have to influence other people or control they have over resources. The sources of organizational power include the following. One category of power is legitimate power. This is power that's drawn from a person's position or role within the organization. The CEO of a company has legitimate power because she has the authority to make decisions and direct others just by virtue of her position. So in organizations, often we see legitimate power bestowed upon people with a management title. Another source of power is reward power. This refers to individuals who have the ability to dole out rewards, things like bonuses, promotions, recognition. People in organizations who control these limited and valuable resources, they can influence other people's behavior by offering or withholding those rewards. Next is coercive power. This is the ability to impose sanctions or punishments, like demoting people, terminating, or disciplining them. Coercive power is used to enforce compliance, but obviously it can lead to resentment and decreased morale if it's overused. Another source of power is expert power. This is power that's drawn not from someone's title, not by someone's access to rewards or punishment, but rather from someone's knowledge, skills, or expertise. Expert power allows individuals to influence other people based on their perceived competence. They're an expert. For example, a specialist in a technical field, they might have significant influence over decisions related to their area of expertise because nobody else knows what to do or how to do it. Finally, we have referent power. This is power that's based on that something else, that woo, that other, that charisma. This is where we have people that have power just because of their personality and their characteristics. This is things like charisma, their likability. Maybe they're highly social people who make friends everywhere they go, or they easily garner respect. Referent power enables individuals to influence others through admiration or identification. Leaders who inspire and motivate others, they often wield referent power. Understanding these sources of power helps organizations recognize how influence is exerted and how it can be managed to achieve organizational goals. Now let's talk about how we use power in organizational politics. Organizational politics involves the use of power, which we just discussed, and influence to achieve personal or organizational objectives, often in ways that are not formally sanctioned by the organization. Political behavior can include lobbying, coalition building, or strategic maneuvering to gain advantages or protect interests. The use of power in organizational politics, it can be positive and it can be negative. On the positive side, political behavior can help individuals and groups navigate complex organizational environments. Maybe those that have a lot of red tape. It helps them secure resources they need to do their jobs, and it helps them advance important initiatives. For example, a manager might have a really strong network of contacts, and they use that power, they use that political network to gain support for a new project that happens to align with the organization's goals. Now, on the flip side, organizational politics, it's not always good. It can be bad. Organizational politics can lead to conflicts, favoritism, and decision-making that prioritizes personal gain over the organization's best interests. This can create a really toxic work environment, it can kill trust in an organization, and it can totally undermine collaboration. Effective management of organizational politics requires understanding those weird and complex dynamics of power and influence. It also requires promoting transparency and fairness, and it also requires ensuring that political behavior aligns with organizational values and objectives. Now let's take a look at the costs and benefits of organizational politics. As I mentioned, politics, they can be good, they can be bad. They can also have costs and benefits, depending on how politics are managed and perceived within the organization. Benefits of politics include the following: enhanced decision-making. Political behavior can facilitate the flow of information and ideas, which is awesome because that leads to better informed and strategic decisions. It also can be beneficial when it comes to resource acquisition. Political maneuvering can help people and groups secure the resources they need to do their jobs, to achieve their objectives, which benefits the organization. Another benefit is career advancement. Individuals who are really skilled in politicking can navigate all of those complex nuances of the workplace, advancing their careers and in turn, contributing to the organization's success. Now let's talk about some of the costs of organizational politics. One is reduced trust. If political behavior is perceived as self-serving or manipulative, it can erode trust among employees and leaders, and it can ultimately lead to a complete breakdown in collaboration and communication. It can also lead to increased conflict. Political maneuvering can create or exacerbate conflicts as individuals and groups start jockeying and competing for power and resources and recognition, and it becomes a really competitive thing. It can also lead to decreased morale. A highly politicized environment is one that most people don't want to work. They're usually not fun places to work. These types of environments can lead to frustration, disengagement, and turnover as employees feel that merit is overlooked in favor of politics. To maximize the benefits and minimize those costs of organizational politics, it can be done, but leaders have to foster a culture of transparency, meritocracy, and ethical behavior, ensuring that political activities contribute to the organization's overall success, not for any individual gain.